So I'm sitting here putting a little bit of thought into what I want to do with this episode today, and it's this passage about Jesus looking back on this whole exchange that he just had on the John the Baptist thing, where John the Baptist isn't really sure what to make of Jesus. He's probably discouraged and in a very difficult place, and so in this moment of difficulty, he sends his own disciples out to Jesus, the beginning of Matthew 11, to go and ask whether Jesus is the one who is to come, the Christ, the Messiah, or if John and his disciples should be expecting someone else. And then Jesus is like, there's all these miraculous things that have happened that are supposed to happen. They're predicted in the very same Old Testament, the very same scriptures, John, that gave you the impression that a Messiah was coming and that there was going to be one who comes and prepares the way. So on the one hand, Jesus has just responded to John and been like, I mean, the laws of time and space are being broken. So I guess that's pretty king to me. And then he turns around and there's a whole bunch of people standing there who implicitly, immediately are like, oh, that John, he just doesn't get it at all. That's so ignorant of him to ask questions like that. And then Jesus points out to them, as we've discussed over the last couple of conversations, that like, hey, you went out in the desert to see this guy. You went out there to see if he was legit, and then you hung out there. I mean, what'd you go out there to see? Was it somebody who wavers, or is it somebody who's a celebrity with power and all this? No, you went to see a prophet. You went to see something that was real. And I tell you, this John the Baptist guy was huge and a big deal, but let me just bottom line it for all of you all here. If you are in the worst seat on the kingdom train, it is better than being in the best seat on the Old Testament train that John the Baptist represents the prophetic culmination of. So Jesus breaks down this whole thing, and you can tell that his nerves are maybe a little bit frayed as he gets to the end of the whole John the Baptist. He's Elijah, and he who has ears, let him hear. Because he goes into this next thing where he says, to what can I compare this generation? And I'm sure that Jesus doesn't just have in mind his quote-unquote crowd of disciples who are following him around flip-flopping regarding, yeah, John is great. Wait, he asked what? John is dumb. Wait, Jesus said he's great. Oh, yeah, John is great. But as we read on, we're also going to see he has in mind a contrast between the detractors of John and the detractors of Jesus. The detractors of John are mad because John went out in the wilderness and nobody functions like that. And you can't do religion like that. You can't be a stick in the mud fundamentalist. Nobody's signing up for that. It's crazy. That's not how God is. That way is wrong. It'll never work. And Jesus comes along and he's like, I'll eat with sinners. That's cool. I'll hang out in towns like a normal person. I'll wear clothes like a normal person. Now I'll go to places where people are getting liquored up and hammered and hang out at their parties and stuff like that. And then people, and maybe even the exact same people, are like, why, you can't do religion like that. That's not how you can come and represent God. The booze and the parties and look at the people who are coming to those parties. It's insane. No, if you wanted to get it right, you'd need to go out in the desert and wear camel clothes and be completely different from everybody, but not like that guy does it. It'd have to be not like that. And I understand that what Jesus is getting at is this frustration moment where it's like, look, am I taking crazy pills? Can nobody else look around here and see that there is actually no pathway that you, the crowds, would tolerate from me? And so I'm still on like this weird introductory thing where I'm sitting here and I'm working on this. I'm like, okay, no, I'd like for there to be a fun little likewise here. What should it be? But the softball that the text is lobbing me is such that I need to rack my brain to try to come up with something about the way we think as a large group of people right now that is inconsistent and hypocritical and fluctuates from day to day depending on what is convenient for each of us and our comfort and the success of our political tribes. Golly, there's just so much, and all of them are black holes for me. So I'm just going to skip doing any kind of likewise thing that's specific and instead just do this. Okay, pretend we're just getting started right now. Ready? Hey, everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. You know how all the things are with all the people all the time? Likewise, in Matthew chapter 11, that's how all the things were with all the people, because the people back then were just like the people right now. And a lot of times we do this thing where something actually does make sense, or it's convicting, or it makes us realize some truth that we maybe don't want to admit to or realize, and then we come up with a defensive reason in our brain to just be like, no, because of how you look, or what you said, or how you said it, or what you tweeted. No, I can't go along with it. Whew, okay, now I'm off the hook from that thing that is the truth that I didn't like. But then no doubt, like a day later in the news cycle, something else is going to come along that makes the same point, or that pushes us toward truth in some way, but it's completely the opposite of what we just criticized. Now we have to come up with a new reason for why we're not going to embrace that new true thing that is challenging to us, or that is totally disastrous for my position. We have to be like, no, I can't do that because of that thing. This is a human tendency. I have come to believe that our decision-making process, our deeply held belief process, is one by which we first feel an emotional response to a thing that is rooted probably in a weird cocktail of our insecurities, presuppositions, stuff that we got told once that we liked in a setting that it made us feel good, plus a dash of the weird narratives that even we don't totally understand that we've crafted for ourselves, about ourselves. And you mix all of that stuff up and stir it around, and what you get out of it is not very rational decision-making, and instead very emotional, visceral, hard to sort out decision-making. And then what we often do as people, and I do mean we, me included, is that then we look for facts that support the thing that we already thought of through very, very dubious emotional means. These people in the first century were doing the same thing. Jesus comes along and he says a bunch of stuff and does a bunch of stuff that's enormously compelling. Right after John the Baptist came along and said a bunch of stuff and did a bunch of stuff that is enormously compelling. What John the Baptist said and how he lived, and what Jesus said and how he lived, was very threatening to a normal first century Galilean life. It was very threatening to the religious assumptions and the narrative assumptions and the political assumptions that people had mixed together in the decision-making cocktail of their soul, and therefore it didn't fit neatly, and people did weird, flustery, inconsistent things to make it go away. On the one hand, it makes me pull what little hair I have left out. And on the other hand, this describes me too, so I feel a bit of empathy. Here's how the passage actually goes. Between verse 15, which says, "He who has ears, let him hear," and verse 16, I imagine there's a verse 15 and a half where there is a sigh. Verse 16, "To what can I compare this generation? They're like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others, 'Hey, we played a flute for you and you didn't dance. Well, we sang a dirge and you didn't mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he's a demon. And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' But wisdom is proved right by her actions." And that last sentence, "wisdom is proved right by her actions," is an allusion to the feminine personification of wisdom that we get back in the book of Proverbs. And it's also an allusion to the theme of vindication. Like, yeah, people are going to say all kinds of stuff, but truth is truth. Reality is reality. And even if those people never admit the inconsistencies, reality speaks and pushes back against those inconsistencies. Now, Jesus looks around, he sees the inconsistency of things, and it might be tempting at this point for us to look at the text and be like, Jesus is he's had about enough of this world. But I don't know, not really. I mean, you go back to the end of chapter 9, and when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. When Jesus sees this dumb stuff, he has a tendency throughout the text to call it out, to demonstrate the rational or irrational hypocrisy, but then to go right back about his business of feeling compelled and empathetic and compassionate because of the hypocrisy and the nonsense, and to continue along his way in advancing the values and the message of the kingdom, which is antithetical to all of that irrational nonsense and points toward something better. Sometimes I have a bad day on Twitter or a bad day in the comment section over on my silly little YouTube channel, and I will, in my brain, be like, stop the world, I want to get off. This is too much. People are being too dumb, and don't pay any attention to my own contributions to the dumbness or to the problems. And I got to tell you, especially on days when I feel like that, especially in seasons, and by seasons I mean election seasons, when I feel like that, It is so refreshing to encounter this Jesus in the text who is so steady and so consistent and has such compassion for people, not just the poor, innocent, naively imagined orphan. Oh, could I have just a bit more food, sir? No, not like that character, but compassion on the turds. Compassion on the rest of us who imagine we're so sophisticated and so smart and so intellectual with all of our clever comments and all of our clever commentary and opinions and astonishment at the wrongness of others. And just here's Jesus. It's so steady. He sees through our, and I do mean our, dumb, silly little inconsistencies. And he loves us anyway, and he does something to redeem anyway. I find that very comforting and very encouraging, and also to very beautifully paint a picture of what it looks like when the kingdom values he is advocating for manifest in the life of an individual. I want what he's having. I want a dash of that patience and that grace and that softness of heart to broken humanity and our broken brains, a reality in which I am among the chief of offenders. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.